Mm-hmm. All right. Hello. I'm Heidi, which you probably already knew that if you're showing up here, but I want to start off with an introduction to give everybody a little bit perspective of what what I'm sharing today. So I'm Heidi, and this is a story of things that have happened to me mostly within the last year. Um, I can only share my perspective of what I went through, and that's what I'm here to do today. I have a little outline, but this is generally unscripted and unedited, obviously, to do this as a live stream, because this is what is more comfortable for me. I am not an experienced presenter, and I don't have a highly polished presentation for you today. I just have a camera and some time to talk about my feelings and what I went through, and this is for me. And that's the statement that I've kept making to help center my intentions, and that's how I want to start this is by a statement of intention to share what this is really about and why I would bother doing this. Um, I have been under a lot of pressure to stay quiet about all kinds of things, and have variously done or not done that. I have found myself kind of caught between all of this conflicting advice of people telling me to do this or don't do this, and the wall of feedback has gotten to be so overwhelming that I cannot sift through it to determine what is worth listening to anymore, and I have to do the thing that feels right for me and for my healing. And so that's what I'm doing today. Um, this is a pretty big thing for me to be talking about all of this. I've never done anything like this. Um, And I have never considered myself a public figure before any of this. I was making art and putting it on the internet publicly, um, but I am not an extremely experienced entertainer or public figure. Um, I just have my thoughts to share. All right. I am not going to be reading any chat during this because it would just get me off mission. I am not even looking at, I have no idea how many people are watching this because it would make me nervous. We're not going to bother with any of that. We're just going to talk. So, it's my statement of intention. This is for me. This is for closure. This is to share what I experienced. It is not a hate stream. It is not centered on harassing or tearing down any other person involved in this on any level. Um, I also wanted to briefly address and then set aside uh, some things that this stream is not about. Um, I would like to say on record, in the interest of fairness and honesty, that I do not believe Jared is a pedophile. I have never brought that accusation against him, and I don't believe that it is true. Um, throughout my entire time knowing him, the good times and bad, I never witnessed anything that made me think that he had that particular perversion. I do not believe he is guilty of that, and I don't believe that he's sexually attracted to children, to say it like that. I do believe he was negligent in confirming ages of people that he did um, interact with online in a sexual manner, and those two things can both exist simultaneously. Uh, I don't know the full truth of the allegations against him. I didn't bring those allegations against him. I have a lot of fear, personally, of him, but I would still like to always believe the best. Um, I think he was messy, and I think he made mistakes that he should be held accountable for. Uh, and his fan interactions were a big part of that. This stream is not about me building a case against him in with anything to do with any of that because it's not that isn't my story. Um, I would cooperate with anybody else who has concerns that they would bring against him. Um, but in the interest of fairness and, you know, I don't want to muddy the waters by accusing him of things or engaging in conversations that accuse him. I didn't even directly bring this against him, but I don't want to be involved in conversations that use those kinds of labels for him, because it's off base and it distracts from what the issue actually is. I do believe that he was extremely irresponsible in taking advantage of his privilege and his position of power over a lot of willing and vulnerable young people. That is a problem. That is still a problem whether they were all 18 and up. It is uh, still a problem if they were all eager to engage with him and didn't feel taken advantage of. Certainly, some people did, and instead of taking that seriously, he made a video. I don't want to get into all of the details there, but he basically, attacked the mental health of these people that he had already taken advantage of, and I don't think there's any excuse for that. But that is the summary of what I can say about that. I basically have, my own opinion on it, but it's not my position to say what did or did not happen, because I don't know. I don't know the full story still after this whole time. Um, I only know that I don't trust him, and I wish that there was more nuance involved in that conversation in general. But I want to move on from that because I have a lot more to cover here. I just wanted to, I guess, touch on that in the beginning to really make the point of saying that if you came here for that reason and you're hoping that that's what this was going to all be about, that's not the point of this at all. Okay, so to set the scene a little bit for my relationship with Jared, we were together for almost 8 years total. I know I said on Twitter at one point that we were best friends for 7 years, and that was kind of a reference to the fact that we were not best friends through the last part of our relationship. So this was a large section of my life. Uh, Certainly the longest relationship I've ever been in, and for him as well. We dated for about 3 years before we got married. We met in our early 20s. We developed our careers alongside each other. He existed on YouTube, and he was I guess, sort of a social media figure, but the landscape on the internet was completely different back then. So he was a personality on a gaming video website, but it was literally a competition to YouTube. It was not on YouTube, and then he also did his own thing on YouTube that gradually developed. So I was with him through these earliest stages of his career, and really saw the way that he changed as a person, and the way that our relationship changed is what ultimately matters. But to set the scene of this relationship, he encouraged me to do cosplay, which I was sort of like casually interested in at the beginning, but I wasn't already successful or already like accomplished in any way on that front. I was just kind of sort of interested. Hey there. Don't spill my latte, please. Um, so I got together with Jared, dated for several years, ended up getting married after about 3 years of dating, got married pretty quickly, and our marriage ended up lasting for almost 5 years. Legally speaking, we barely just like passed the 5 year mark a little while ago, but not until we had already filed. So anyway, what polyamory meant to us is also something that I need to establish. So when I initially came forward on Twitter talking about how Jared had cheated on me and I had gone through this horrible situation, I did not include the detail that we had previously been in a polyamorous relationship, because it was not the point, and ultimately the polyamory that period of polyamory did not excuse his behavior and the way that he did go behind my back and cheat on me. Bringing up polyamory on his end, to me, really seemed like a tactic to confuse people, to say, oh, well, she approved of it. There's actually a lot of blame in every level of those statements. But to talk about polyamory in the sense that we experienced it, I do need to clear that up now. It was brought up. So, yes, for a period of our relationship, only starting in 2017 in the summer, was when we had our first discussion about polyamory and what polyamory would look like to us. Polyamory is a type of relationship that you can consent to, if you desire, to open up the boundaries, but but you have specific boundaries. Another phrase that's important here is ethical non-monogamy, which basically means that you are not monogamous, but that you are engaging in that ethically. We did not have ethical non-monogamy. We had unethical non-monogamy, where my boundaries were continually taken advantage of at every turn. And then at the end of everything, he was still willing to come online and say, but we were poly, so she approved of this, and I didn't cross her boundaries, and that is extremely hurtful and dehumanizing. But polyamory requires boundaries. Boundaries are a very, very important part of that type of relationship. If you don't set the groundwork for what you will allow and what you won't allow, what your comfort level is with your partner, you are setting yourself up for disaster. I say, as though I experienced anything but disaster. And yet, I tried to set boundaries. I really, really did. Jared and I had an important conversation where we discussed everything that could be involved in our version of polyamory and what we expected from each other, what we needed from each other in order to make this work. The only way that I was willing to engage in this type of relationship to begin with is because I had full trust in him. I completely trusted him 100% to be honest and transparent with me, and I believed that at the end of the day, he would always come to me with the truth. And that trust in him was taken advantage of and broken over and over and over again for the entire time that we were together after that. We had this important conversation about what our boundaries would look like. The biggest one was that polyamory has to be approved on a case-by-case basis. If one of us wants to interact with another person, we need to talk about that. This is not a free-for-all where we both just get to do whatever we want. Secondly, we both need to have an equal ability to totally pull the plug at a moment's notice when our comfort level is compromised. That is something that goes both ways, that we would each have an opportunity to do completely fairly. And so I entered into an understanding that my comfort level would always be respected, that I would be allowed to say no when I meant no, and that the no would be respected, and also that we always needed a hard yes, that each person needed a hard yes for this, yes for that, and a case-by-case approval where we're in constant communication about what's happening. That is what we agreed to. Almost none of that happened. And there's a lot to unpack there. Okay. So I had this conversation about boundaries with Jared. We agreed on our expectations, our emotional needs, what we, would provide for each other, and what we could expect to receive. We had the most important conversation, involved in setting up this type of situation, relationship. And within a few months, I'm trying to remember the exact time frame, we had the conversation of the summer of 2017. Shit hit the fan early 2018 with the whole Holly situation. During that time, I was like, okay, polyamory is not working for me. This is terrible. I guess it was within a few months of trying to work through what had happened in early 2000. So yeah, early 2018, around the time Jared told me point blank that he remembered having a conversation about our boundaries and that he wasn't going to argue about the fact that it had happened. Certainly, this conversation had happened, but according to him, he suddenly and mysteriously could not remember any of the content of that discussion. So, the most important conversation that two people who are interested in polyamory could have, laying the groundwork, and I deeply regret not putting this in writing and signing it. Do not ever attempt. I'm going to be in a position in my life for a long time where I'm going to need things in writing. I'll just say that. I deeply regret not recording our boundaries and getting that in writing and signing it, because I was later put into a position where I tried to come to him and say, look, we talked about this. This is very important. This was the groundwork by which we agreed that this could even be a thing that we try. And for you to say, oh yeah, I remember that happened for sure, but I don't remember what we talked about, is like, and that is such a huge slap in the face to the very concept of transparency and solidarity. Uh, Especially because by the time I was like, hey, you are not respecting these boundaries and I am in distress, let's talk about this. By the time I was at that point and feeling hurt, he was like, oh yeah, I believe you that I broke your boundaries. I believe you that this is messy and, sorry, but what did I do wrong? I don't get it. And it just was hugely insulting to the very idea that we were working together or that we had a mutual respect in this arrangement. And so I tried to remind him of what all of those boundaries were, and none of those conversations made a bit of difference in his behavior. And so I was just continually had my boundaries stomped over again and again and again by someone who claimed ignorance, that they just didn't know what they were doing and they couldn't remember what they had agreed to, and so, oh, I'm sorry. And yet there was never a productive conversation about trying it. Okay, I'm going to keep referring to my outline and keep moving on, because this could be really long if I let it be, but we're not going to do that. Today we're focused on our long-term goals, which I had some conversations with a friend leading into this about what do I want from this? What am I expecting to gain from the stream? Um, so I'm gonna keep coming back to my intentions. You gotta stay on track here. I am fully aware that I can't change the world's opinion of me. It is not practical or realistic to be able to win over everybody who doesn't agree with me. Okay. What I want today and why I'm speaking up for myself is because I've never actually sat and told the whole thing from start to finish. And when I do that, I will have said my piece. I will have answered the questions. I will have hopefully alleviated some of the pressure that I feel just like constantly swirling of all of these things um, that are happening in the public eye. And Jared has repeatedly made the statement that he wants to respect privacy, and my privacy specifically. And that I think what he really means is that he wants to control the narrative. He wants to be able to to say only what he wants to say, and that if I try to add anything to it, then it's a violation of privacy. Um, and so today, this stream and my decision to share my entire perspective is a statement against being silenced by someone who's capable of doing that. It is a exercise in not allowing the public story to be totally out of my control. I will say this: if I had any less willpower throughout this situation, they would have shut me up a long time ago, and I would have retreated to the pit of obscurity, um, with nothing to show for myself because I have been deeply emotionally broken throughout this situation, and yet I am still going. And that's what this stream is about today. It's about me still going and moving on and moving forward and saying what I need to say to not allow my story to be told by those whose only goal is to silence me. And we're going to stay strong. We are. Oh my gosh. What an experience this has been. Okay. So, going back to our history of polyamory and boundaries that are being broken. To set the scene with what happened between Deeth and Strix, let's talk about that. So, during the fall of 2017, Jared and I moved from Los Angeles to Washington. We've been living in LA, where we primarily hung out with Holly and the person she was married to then. They only lived like 10 minutes away from us, and so we didn't. LA is very hard to navigate, and there's all different kinds of suburbs and stuff. So we got into the habit of just kind of seeing them all the time. They were a couple friends, and we spent a lot of time at each other's houses, just watching YouTube, TV, whatever, shooting the shit. During this time, there was no existing romantic or sexual tension between Holly and Jared at all. We spent years in close quarters with them, and we're all friends, and things were very comfortable, and there was no tension or indication that anything romantic would ever be brewing below the surface. What developed genuinely unfolded as a product of their online public roleplay. When Dice Camera Action started, they were both playing characters that were basically self-inserts. Jared's particular character has been his character, like, throughout his life. Like, I think he created Deeth when he was in, like, middle school or something. You could probably, he's probably shared more details of that somewhere. This is like a historical self-insert character that exists to be the fantasy version of him. Getting a gig with Wizards of the Coast is a really big deal for him. I was so proud of him for having, spent his whole life like being a fan of this company and being involved in the D&D scene. And thank you. Oh yes. This is special guest appearance by my number one supporter, my ride or die, the orange boy, Aries. We're not going to let him completely distract us, but he's forever my moral support. So Jared gets this gig with Wizards of the Coast. He becomes Deeth Woodrow. He is very much excited and proud to be a part of this whole game and this prominent opportunity, and I'm so proud of him that he was able to accomplish all of this, especially having been by his side, like, from his roots, and, like, seeing him flourish online. So Dice Camera Action starts. Holly and Jared are their characters. Holly, at the beginning of her story as Strix, insisted Strix was asexual, which she very much played in the game, as I recall. I never watched whole chunks of Dice Camera Action. I was often, like, around in the background where I could, like, hear Jared engaging in it. I generally did not watch all of his content throughout the time we were together because it was just too much. It was, like, I could hear you recording in the other room. I don't need to, like, watch every video. So anyway, I wasn't necessarily, like, monitoring the game or knew what was going on in it, but I was present for a lot of conversations that they would have about it off camera and behind the scenes. And so Holly explained in great detail that Strix is asexual. They spent a lot of time discussing the brother-sister relationship between Dieth and Strix and how that was very genuine and how they wanted to portray that. And it was the fall of 2017 when Jared came home from one of his trips where he had been playing a game. I don't remember which one it was, but they went to a series of events where they would go and play live with the whole crew. And so he would go off on these trips, play D&D at an event, come home, and I would stay home for that. I didn't need to be there. Um, he came home from one of these trips and basically like informed me that they had all gotten drunk at the bar together and were so excited and talking about their lore and their story, and that he and Holly were like had drunkenly confessed to each other, essentially, as their characters. Or they had come up with this concept of, oh, what if Dieth and Strix are together? And that this was a result of their excited conversation at the bar of this world that they were both, deeply involved in emotionally. And that this very much originated as a part of the story. They came up with this idea of, well, what if there is tension there? What if that could be cute? What if there is an opportunity for our characters to be together? What if my character could overcome this anxiety? And like at the time, especially being like kind of on the outside periphery and hearing about them talk about things behind the scenes, I was like, okay, well that's interesting. That's cool that you're playing D&D on a level that you have the opportunity to invest yourself emotionally in this way. It's a very rare opportunity, especially for two like D&D lifelong nerds that you would. D&D is such a big part of your lives that you would relate emotionally this way. And so this like idea of this romance genuinely developed as role play that they took seriously and got excited over and then were flirting over, and then it was, oh, do we actually like each other? All of this happened without them asking me if I was okay with it. And I'm sitting there listening to it and wanting to be the cool girl who's okay with it. I was continually put into positions where I was just listening to Jared talk about um, what he was doing. Like, his whole online shtick with send nudes on Tumblr, like, I just watched that unfold the same as anyone. He didn't have conversations with me behind the scenes about, like, oh, geez, you really want my book. He didn't have conversations behind the scenes like, oh, what if I created a nudes blog? He just did it. I found out that he was doing it when he posted about it publicly. And then it creates a situation where if I want to bring it up and have a conversation about it, then I'm the bad guy, the nagging wife who's like, hey, honey, wait a second. You just started a nudes blog without, like, clearing it with me. The same thing went for his Snapchat existing. I didn't know that he was even using Snapchat until he promoted it on his Tumblr as, haha, I don't know if I can keep using Tumblr, I might get caught. You should follow me on Snapchat instead. And I looked at that and I was just like, should I say something? If I say something, then I'm making it awkward. If I say something, then I'm not being cool. If I have to bring it up and come to him and say, hey, I think it's weird that you are just randomly accepting shitloads of nudes from your fans, then I'm this nagging harpy in your story that's shutting you down and not letting you get what you want. And that was continually the position that I was put into. So Jared and Holly start this thing, and I don't object, but I just sit there and listen to it. Stuff escalates. Over the course of several months, they are writing their own graphic, explicit sexual fan fiction about their characters banging each other. Commissioning explicit pornography of their characters banging each other by fan artists. They actually created a group account that all members of DCA had access to that was under a like dummy name. It was a sock puppet that they could use to commission DCA art of their own characters from their fans. there you go. Maybe the internet sleuths can put that one together. I'm not touching it. I'm not going any farther down that rabbit hole, but I remember them all excitedly talking about it and exchanging information. And oh, we have this shared account, this shared password where we are commissioning art of Diethan Strix banging and Evelyn and Paulton, etc. And everyone was participating. This happened without any clearance, without questioning if I was going to be cool with it, without, checking in with the boundaries and the dynamic. They were just doing this. We did this for months and months before I reached a point where I said, look, Jared, you wake up and check your phone. You spend all day in your DCA group chat. You go to bed on your phone. You are glued to your phone all day long writing D&D porn. I sit next to you and I watch it. I used to hear some of it read out loud to me against my will. It's very cringy. And he told me that I was being unsupportive. Sorry, I'm gonna collect myself. I sat and watched my husband exchange explicit pornography of his D&D characters for months and didn't address it because I didn't know what to say and I didn't want to be the asshole. And then after months, I finally looked at him and said, look, I'm not an idiot. You're obsessed with this. You spend all day talking about this. You are in and out all day on your phone, Diethan Strix all day. I am uncomfortable. It is very clear that something is going on between you and Holly, that you spend all of this time exchanging fluff about, oh, what would it be like when Diethan and Strix confess to each other in game? Oh, here's a one shot about my character's perspective about it was over the top. I'm sorry, I'm going on we're gonna keep moving. Alright. So this was all happening and I was forced to accept it or forced to call them out. So after several months of accepting it, I called them out and I said, look, I'm not an idiot. I see this happening. I feel frustrated by my continual questions and you insisting that no, it's just a game. No, we're just role playing. Oh, haha, she's ace. Nothing's happening. Oh, I don't even know if she's in an open relationship, so, we can't go there. Finally, I'm like, look, you need to say something. You need to address this. I am tired of it going on around me and not being able to, feeling like I'm not allowed to address it or feeling like I'm being treated like I'm stupid by this continual insistence that it's not happening, it's not real, we're not emotionally invested when you're clearly emotionally invested. Anyway, so our boundaries were broken. Holly went online and posted her side of the story where they went on a long walk together. According to them, I pushed them together and then also pulled them apart, and it was so dramatic, and that I'm responsible for them being together, but also responsible for them not being allowed to be together, and that both of those things are my fault. And it's like, what are you, like, characters in a story that I'm telling? Like, are you, like, what? Are you, like, puppets that are being manipulated by someone else? Like, take some ownership over your lives and your behavior. Like, clearly you are acting a certain way, and I want you to address it. That's what I brought to them. I did not push them together. I said, hey, I'm not blind and I'm not stupid. And I released my entire conversation with Holly in text message form. I'm going to briefly revisit it. If you care, you can read it. If you don't, I don't know why you're here. But I wanted to hit the high points because what is recorded here is our actual conversation. My conversations that happened with Jared about polyamory and boundaries happened in person because he was my husband. We were sitting there together. I don't have a recording of that. I don't have proof that we talked about this or agreed to certain things. I do have proof that I talked to Holly about this and that we agreed to certain things and that I thought, had an adult conversation with nuance where we met in the middle and understood each other. I thought, originally. And so that's what I posted. The screenshots here is as full of a transcript as I could comfortably release in terms of, like, mentions of other people that I did try to cut down on. And the relevance of this is that this is in her own words and in real time, the development of the conversations that Holly and I had about polyamory, boundaries, Jared, DCA, what we expected from each other, what I was uncomfortable with, what my expectations were moving forward. This is all recorded here. She has released her own statements in summary of how she felt, calling me abusive, calling me so angry at her, unwilling to accept her apologies, that she didn't even know what she was apologizing for, which is clear in these messages. She said that she tried to give me gifts and that I just wouldn't accept them. A lot of her statements are clearly at odds with her statements in our conversation, which you can read. You don't have to take my word for it. You can compare her conversation with me and the things she says with me to appease me, compared to the things that she was willing to go online and say publicly to the entire world afterward in order to get what she wanted, in a general sense. Alright, so our conversation started in November 2017. Well, I included an older comment where I'd reached out to her asking you for recommendations for fan artists so that I could get some fan art pieces for our house, my house with Jared, for decorative purposes to create this D&D space for him. They later told me that I just did not support their game, and if I had supported their game more, then they wouldn't have iced me out of my marriage. And here I have in writing my efforts to please my husband by investing my artistic skill, time, money, and effort into creating a space specifically for his D&D game. So, we have this exchange. Moving along, Jared and Holly have their moment of truth where they discuss the fact that, they do actually have feelings for each other and they were just in intense denial. And this is where it gets relevant. On February 8th was when Holly reached out to me and apologized for upsetting shit that happened this weekend, which is everything to do with them going on a walk in the middle of the night without their phones and no way for me to contact them. I was upstairs working on a costume in my workroom because I was preparing for Katsucon. It was the Katsu Crunch. And many hours passed. It was 4 or 5 in the morning, and I went downstairs to see where they had gone. This is the night that I'm expecting them to have some sort of conversations to confront this topic. That is not the same as saying, hey, you should go and have sex tonight. It is, hey, let's open this conversation because this is clearly happening and I'm not okay with this unfolding with no conversation. So that was my expectations for that evening, was that we would initiate a conversation. So they go off and have a conversation. In the middle of the night, I come downstairs to an empty, quiet house. All the lights are off and there's no sign of them. I have been repeatedly trying to contact Jared on his phone to no avail, and everything's quiet and dark. And I went back to my workroom and I looked around and I thought that the only explanation that seemed reasonable to me in the moment was that they must have already just gone off to the guest room to have sex with each other without acknowledging me. Thankfully, that wasn't true. They were actually outside walking around for hours without considering what the effect of them disappearing in the middle of the night might look like to a wife who is sitting at home on the phone waiting to hear back from them. And so I was angry about, they eventually came home to me crying on the phone with a friend. I let them back into the house because I locked the front door. It was the middle of the night. And they just were ashamed and unwilling to speak to me. I explained to Jared in nuanced detail why that experience was so hurtful to me and why this was such a difficult thing to go through. And he insisted that he fully understood my perspective and that my feelings were valid and that he was sorry, and I, accepted that apology, but was also just still hurting. So Holly had apologized for that experience. That was when she said, I get so scared that you hate me because you're so nice and pretty. And I know that it's stupid, but that's why I was afraid to talk at breakfast, and I really should have. So the morning after all this happened, we went out to breakfast together, and I sat there waiting for one of them to have the balls to be like, So I'm sorry about last night. We've had this conversation. We've decided to move forward like adults. Neither one of them did that for the entirety of brunch, and I just sat there like, this is not my responsibility. This is not my part of the relationship. It is not my job to go out of my way to make them comfortable with me or vice versa if they want to do this. Like, if Jared is intending to be poly in this way, he needs to address it. He needs to take initiative and take ownership over what is happening here in this dynamic. They did not discuss it then with me. And also keep in mind that their conversation was, among other things, I told Jared that night, okay, find out if her marriage is even open. We don't know that. We don't even know if she's allowed to see other people or talk to other people. There had been no discussion of that. They had been like fully engaged in this like super nasty, explicit sexual content with their D&D characters without ever having a conversation about whether or not polyamory was even on the table between either of their relationships. Well, I don't know. Maybe Jared might have said something to her like, "Oh, we're poly, so it's fine," because he loved to say it to people apparently behind my back. But I know for a fact that on his end, we had, because I was asking him, I was like, "Please keep me updated." We had zero confirmation on whether or not Holly was even available for any type of polyamorous situation. So this was still in the earliest stages of finding out if this can be a thing that happens. That's where I was emotionally, is let's find out if this can be a thing that happens. Within 24 hours of me being like, let's find out if this is a thing that can happen, Holly had admitted to Jared that actually she had never experienced any romantic or sexual feelings before in her life except for him. And I was like, what? That's not okay. That's not polyamory. What you're asking for is not that you want to engage in a respectful side thing with boundaries and that you understand. What you are literally admitting is that you don't want any other relationship except for Jared, and that you also don't want Jared to be with anyone else but you. She said things that were very scary, about how she felt like they were soulmates, and that he was the one that was like destined to the person that she wished she had known from high school, and all of these things about how they were destined to be together. And it was literally like this dice camera action story, this lore that they have created and latched onto, this narrative of how important their romance is. Anyway, I sent Holly a message saying I'm tired of playing dumb and being treated like I'm stupid. I intentionally stayed out of the way and gave you space to let things play out. I'm going to end up reading this. I have been so open and supportive to Jared about all of this, and in return he has lied, denied, and left me hanging for hours without a word of acknowledgement. I literally don't know how I could have been any more accepting, and I felt like he spat in the face of that. Every conversation that I've had with him about this is because I brought it up. At breakfast, when neither of you could bring yourselves to acknowledge what was going on to me, even though we all clearly knew, I thought that was incredibly cowardly of you both. I was left feeling like, if this is how they are treating me in the face of my unwavering support, how could I ever trust them to be straight with me? And what I got was several apologies. But it was, I'm sorry that it was an accident. I'm sorry we didn't mean it. And at this time, what I said to them was, Jared knows he's a long way to go to re-earn my trust. If you truly want to be my friend, you'll have to do the same. I'm very glad that you finally addressed this with me because I needed you to. This is a start. So my messages here are expressing my hurt and disappointment, feeling like my boundaries have been broken, and it is very much within my rights, and I have zero regrets about withdrawing from this friendship. Because that's basically what I did at this point. I withdrew from my friendship with her. Within several months, I eventually unfollowed her on social media and stuff, which actually upset her enough that she vague tweeted about it. I unfollowed her on Instagram, and my reasoning for doing this was because I felt so hurt after so much time had passed. Several months had passed of like never addressing this and never really getting acknowledgement that she understood. Well, I'm sorry, I've actually gotten ahead of myself. I'm telling things out of order, and I'm leaving out a really important fact. So Holly and I had this initial conversation about how we wanted transparency. I said, all I want is transparency and honesty for me both. I'm going to need a lot more of that than what either of you has given me so far. She acknowledges that she understands because I helped give them perspective and acknowledge what was happening, because she's lacking in emotional experience, and because I brought this to her attention, she was now more prepared to deal with it. We had this conversation where we met on common ground, we discussed our emotions, and I felt like we had really handled things like an adult. Unbeknownst to me, as this conversation, it was totally weird. Thank you for apologizing, that means so much. She says, thank you so much. If you have any advice at all, I'm down to listen. This is what we're talking about. This is the wavelength we're on, of compromise and understanding. Simultaneously, while she's sending me these messages, she's sending Jared a message, or messages, starting with, Jared, as your friend, I just have to be honest with you, you're in an abusive relationship. And Jared came back to her immediately with, Holly, as your friend, how dare you? I don't have a screen cap of them saying this. I looked at it on his phone. He showed it to me because he was like, I'm sorry, this is not appropriate. He showed it to me because that's how he felt. She called me abusive, and he said, how dare you? His words. That is not what is happening here. And then he came and showed it to me and said, I'm sorry, your trust has been broken. Later that night. Yeah, I'm skipping through things. We're gonna keep pushing forward. Okay. She brought this incredibly damaging and very serious accusation against me to Jared. In her words, because she was lashing out, feeling threatened. She's just reacting, and that she later says that it was wrong. Just keep skipping through this. So as I was having, I'm sorry, I skipped over some details. She called me abusive at the moment when I finally said, this can't happen anymore. This can't work anymore. That's exactly how things happen. I was trying to go along with it. There's another longer message that I wrote that is pretty important. I said to her, it made me very uncomfortable that you made multiple statements suggesting that you felt something for Jared that was more intense or real or important than your feelings for your husband. At first, I was hoping that Jared could help you experience something that you were missing, but as things went on, it just started to seem like you're completely in love with Jared, and he's not available for that type of relationship. I know feelings and physicality are deeply entwined and intertwined. You guys obviously have this emotional connection, but if that's allowed to go into the real world, there's nothing to prevent that from just escalating indefinitely as you continue this on-screen fictional relationship with infinite potential to take over your emotions in real life. And that scares me because that's not what I signed up for. This is what I said to her. So it was actually at the point where we were having this mutual conversation about why I was pulling the plug. Once again, all of this happened within the course of a few days before Jared and Holly had ever made physical contact of any kind. They had not even kissed, supposedly, if I'm to take their word for it. They had not even kissed at this point. This is not a moment where things have escalated and I've already let them bang over and over again and now they can't control it. This is literally day one and we're still waiting for permission from Holly's husband. This is before we have even broached that topic with him. Yeah, moving. I have no idea what happened. As another disclaimer there, I have no idea what his experience was like. I can't speak for him. Won't. I don't know what he did, said, felt through any of this. All I know is that on my end, I watched Holly taking advantage of a situation that had not been cleared with all parties. And I was sitting there waiting, like, okay, before anything starts, we're clearing this with all parties, right? And they got a resounding no from me before we had cleared with all parties. And so by the time Holly was seeking her own permission in her own relationship, I had already said no very, very clearly. There wasn't an overlap where we all agreed and then I got uncomfortable. This was like, they took advantage of me out of the gate. I immediately knew this is not okay, and this is way out of their control, and that they are not checking themselves. I said no before Holly's husband had an opportunity to say yes. I don't know what he said. I don't know what their conversation was. I have no idea what happened there. But I said no before he was asked. That's all I know. There was never a point in time where everyone was on the same page and knew. And that is also here in these messages, and I left that in because that's important. I think she's taken advantage of the situation in public by trying to say that, oh, everything was open and everybody agreed on everything. That is literally untrue. And it is written down here in these messages that she was waiting for permission. And I was waiting for permission. And I reached a point where I watched them exchanging. This is why I yelled at them. I watched them exchanging explicit sexual messages about the specific ways in which they were going to have sex with each other in the costume that I had made him before Holly had even had a conversation with her partner about opening her marriage. And I saw that and I said, no. If you are doing this if you are already on this page, you are way ahead of everybody else. You are already discussing in graphic detail the ways that you can't wait to have sex with each other. And meanwhile, your partner doesn't even know that you are considering this as an option. That is cheating. You are a cheater. You have cheated, and I am not okay with it. And what I am witnessing here, if you will do it to another person in this situation, you will do it to me. And that is the point where I pulled the plug and I said, no, I am not okay with this. I am watching you talk about how you can't wait to fuck this other woman in a costume that I made you. And we haven't even sat down as a group and discussed whether or not we are all okay with this. So I said no. And that was the point, that was the point where I had raised my voice in order to make myself heard over her frantic, hysterical explanations. I raised my voice at her on the phone. We continued to have our conversation where we met on common ground, and I said, I'm sorry for yelling at you. My emotions are running high. This is where I'm at, and let's compromise. Let's discuss things transparently. And so she was ostensibly doing that with me. She says, it's okay. I'm here for you if you need to talk. I feel like I betrayed you as a friend, not knowing your boundaries, and the whole situation was just so insane for me, I think my rational brain shut down. This is her response to me saying, no, you actually can't fuck my husband because I'm super uncomfortable that you were already talking about it before your husband even knew that that was a thing that you wanted. And so she's like, I feel like I betrayed you as a friend not knowing your boundaries. And I'm like, girl, you should be worried about your boundaries. You should be worried about your partner's boundaries. Then she goes on to say, you made me feel better too, and I sort of deserve to be yelled at. Also, yelling feels good, haha. I have nothing but so much compassion for you guys. I really mean that. And I said, thanks, and I do believe that, but my emotions are really raw right now, and I'll probably need space and time to feel comfortable again. So Holly and I talked about this, had this, and here's another one message for me. I wanted to be generous and understanding and chill, but it's just gotten to be too much. That's where I was at emotionally. Holly says, you're not that bad. You're not the bad guy, Heidi. Jared didn't communicate well with me, and I was in crazy denial. And I feel like I need and I need to understand my feelings and sexuality better, so I feel like I have no control over how I feel, and I'm going to deal with that now. It needs to be dealt with. Yeah, she was basically claiming that she didn't understand her own emotions, and that she was so overwhelmed with them that she just like couldn't process them and couldn't be held responsible for them. So it's actually this day, while we were having this conversation, is the moment she accuses me of abusing him. I got a little bit ahead of myself because there's so much going on, and I want to keep moving forward. But the text messages are really important because they are the story in real time. This is the conversation that we had. This is the transcript of what Holly and I discussed about that she later felt comfortable going onto the internet to say, oh, well, she actually is abusive. I said it, and then I told her it wasn't true, but then it was true. I was just lying when I said it wasn't true. And yet, her explanation is controlled and nuanced. This is not her panicking and struggling to find excuses. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm not gonna get bogged down here. We're gonna keep moving. This is what happened with Holly. I watched this relationship unfold between her and Jared. I tried to call them out on it. I tried to be okay with it. I tried to find ways that we could work within the boundaries of what I already had going on to find common ground, and what I got was lies, deceit, watching them take advantage of someone else not knowing what was going on. Um, Play dumb and insist that they didn't know and they couldn't control their emotions. They didn't understand them, and whatever was happening was just, oh, they're just like little babies that they don't understand what's going on. And this is what I lived with, just trying to get them to acknowledge this was happening and that it needed to be addressed if it was going to happen ever. Anyway, Holly calls me abusive. Jared says, how dare you? Jared shows it to me. Holly slithers to apologize and say, I didn't mean it. I say, okay, well, I don't trust you now, but this is over. And then I withdraw from my friendship with her, pretty much. I was the one to unfollow her first across all social media. I did that because I felt, this is where I was going to. I felt deeply hurt by her accusations against me, the fact that she admitted to weaponizing abuse claims, point blank, and saying, I just did that because I was scared and hurting because you yelled at me, so therefore you're a bad guy. I got scared that you were angry and rationalized that your anger isn't valid and therefore you're a bad guy, is basically the process that was communicated to me. I was deeply hurt by that. I had asked her to, I was like, look, I don't trust you. I don't believe that what you're saying to me is true anymore. I think that you're just trying to get me to be happy again. You'll say whatever to make me not mad. And like, it's childish, uncomfortable, awkward. I didn't say these things to her. It's just my internal reaction. I was like, I can't be a part of this. You know, let them do their thing with their D&D show. I don't need to interfere with that. But and she even begs me in text, please, it's just a game. It's just 2 hours of our week where I can set things aside and just be heroes in our world. I don't know her exact words, but it's to that effect. She eventually sent me a present, which was some coffee stout, some nice beers that she ordered online and had sent to my house. There was no note, there was no name on it. I literally didn't know what it was. I thought it was delivered to me by mistake. I was like, why did I get these? And like, where did these come from? And I asked Jared, I was like, what is this? And he was like, oh, Holly sent that to you. That's your apology. And I was like, I'm used to apologies that come with words. I don't like to have my emotions manipulated with gifts. I don't feel like that is productive. I don't feel like that addresses things. I don't feel like that represents understanding of how or why I was hurt. And that therefore, like, handing me an item doesn't do a lot for me. Especially after I reached this point emotionally where I was like, this is going to take work for me to trust you again. She also says in her last message to me ever, I'm working on a letter to send you, so just keep an eye out for that too. She wanted to send me a physical letter in the mail, and she talked about it several times. I never received this letter. From the way she described it, I got the impression that it was supposed to be like a grand romantic gesture. And this is something that she did often, and I actually have evidence of her doing this with Jared, where she would hand him um, physical written letters that were like scratched out with a quill and ink in like Strick's handwriting and like deliberately messy and like ink stained and oil stained, and she would go out of her way to like create an art letter that is basically like an artifact from the world. And the way that she spoke about wanting to apologize to me via letter, I got the impression that she wanted to craft this thing that would represent all of her emotions or something like that, and that I was going to receive some sort of. My understanding was that she wanted it to be like some sort of artistic gesture instead of just an apology, instead of just the content and the substance of saying, I understand where you're coming from. I'm sorry that my behavior hurt you, and I am planning to change my behavior to avoid doing that in the future. There you go. There's how to apologize. There's your 3-step explanation for how to deliver a sincere apology to anybody in any situation when you feel like it's valid. Is I acknowledge your pain and I am empathizing with you. I understand the relationship between my behavior and, the results and how you feel, and I will avoid that behavior. That is what matters when it comes to connecting with someone, empathizing with someone, um, respecting someone in a friendship where something goes wrong and one of you needs to apologize. I have apologized to many of my friends, and I will keep apologizing to them for the rest of my life, because the strongest friendships I have are the ones where something happened along the way and we apologize to each other. And the moment of maturity that you have to share to say, hey, I understand that I fucked up. Or, hey, I accept that you fucked up and I still want you in my life. I want you to be my friend. You have to find that common ground with someone in a way that, like, there is substance to a proper apology. What I received was gifts with no note, no letter, and I didn't care about the artistic or visual or aesthetic meaningful gesture that I think she wanted it to be. I think that she hyped it up in her mind as this big thing that she needed to do to fix everything, and then never sent it. Jared told me that she had admitted to writing the letter and then showed it to her therapist, and that her therapist told her not to send it because it was just groveling. This is like third-hand information about why I didn't get an apology, because she was just groveling. Anyway, I think that she had a lot of pent-up resentment over me not just, okay, we're good, Holly. Because when I unfollowed her out of feeling hurt that our friendship never had a mature moment of true empathy and understanding, I distanced myself from her. I said, okay, it hurts me to see these posts. It hurts me to feel like, my emotions ultimately didn't matter to these people. And it hurts me to feel like, I put my best effort into this friendship and felt ultimately disrespected. So I, for my own health, over several months, eventually unfollowed her. She was evidently so upset about this that she vague tweeted online, oh, I'm just having a bad day because one of my friends unfollowed me on Instagram and I just don't know what to do. I saw that and I was like, what? Anyway, so that is not the behavior of someone who believes that an abuser just left their life. If she has henceforth come forward and said that I was abusing Jared for our entire relationship, that she was never really my friend, and that, she cut me out because I was toxic. I walked away from this friendship, and I unfollowed her first. And she was so upset about it that she vague tweeted to the world. So you internet sleuths can look at that one and see if you can find it, but I think she deleted everything. Anyway, I need to move on. We're going to keep talking about what happens next. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of this. This is still good, though. This is good for me to talk through things and feel like I can... I'm leaving it behind when I say it out loud. That's what we're doing here. When I get a chance to vocalize it and say, what I experienced, what I went through, when I get to convey this information and know that these answers are now out there for whoever's invested, it reminds me that it alleviates this pressure of feeling continually everyone's demanding answers. So here's the answers. I put them out there. You can love me, hate me, judge me. I'm not perfect. I didn't do everything right in the situation, but I tried really hard in good faith to be honest and loyal to someone who did not give me that back. As time went on, Jared insisted to me that he was no longer going to be seeing or talking to Holly, and that he had distanced himself from her, and that he distanced himself from his emotions in the game, and all this. I continually wanted clarity. I continually felt hurt and pushed out. I was watching as various people in LA started mysteriously distancing themselves from me, and I realized that this is Holly. That she was... Anyway, I'm speculating about a lot of stuff. I entered a point of trying to... Jared and I are continuing on as a couple, and this is like, I guess, summer 2018 is about where we're at. I continually am trying to bring up my emotions with him and just generally talk about my experience. Every single time I try to address any of the problems we've had, any of the ways that I felt hurt, he goes silent and shuts down and stonewalls me and refuses to engage in any level of conversation about our relationship issues point blank. This started around spring of 2018, and it gradually got worse through the end. So over about the course of a year, he started giving me the silent treatment anytime that I would try to address literally anything that happened in our relationship. Emotions were not talked about. I continually felt like I was wrong for even trying to bring them up. I wanted clarity. I was getting to a point where I was feeling desperate and trying to reach out to mutual friends or reaching out to people that I trusted, people that I thought, real relationships with around me, to tell them what was going on, try to get some help, try to get some people who were aware that I was struggling in my relationship with feeling heard and feeling like shut down, like nothing that I experienced or said mattered. And Jared was continually angry that I would dare to speak about this with other people because those were his friends, and specifically those were people he knew through YouTube. And he told me point blank that he felt that it was vindictive for me to speak to someone that I considered a personal friend because that person was also a business friend of Jared. And I could not convince him that my emotions were valid and worth talking about with someone, and if it wasn't going to be Jared, then I deserved to speak to someone else, and could not convince him. By the fall of 2018, Holly announced her divorce on Twitter. I actually saw her ex's tweet. It was sent to me, and when I clicked on her name for the first time in months and months, I discovered that I was blocked. And I was like, huh, that seems unmotivated. After we had had these conversations that supposedly ended peaceably and amicably with, me saying, well, thank you for the gift, but I still need space. That I was blocked, that she had gone on her own from openly whining about me unfollowing her to several months later blocking me. I can only speculate about what happened emotionally there, but I believe it, to be pent-up resentment that she didn't get her approval from somebody who had been hurt. And so she announces her divorce, and in the same tweet is announcing her move. I don't get to see her side of things because I just discovered that I'm blocked, but I discovered that she is divorcing and moving to where I live in the same fell swoop. She made some excuse about wanting to be around trees, which was hilarious to me because when we moved to Seattle, we invited her and her partner at the time to come with us. We were like, you know, you guys are our best friends here. Why don't you move with us? The Pacific Northwest is beautiful. You would love it there. And her explanation was, well, I'm LA, Southern California, born and raised. This is my place. And whenever I when I leave the smog of LA, I can't breathe anymore. Haha, I'm just acclimated to the LA atmosphere. It's literally the opposite explanation she gave for why she eventually moved to be near trees. And it's like, okay, cool. It sounds really genuine after you told me that you didn't need the forest, that you needed the disgusting smog of LA, and that leaving your smog cloud made you uncomfortable, and that now it's the opposite story because you mysteriously want to be in Seattle. So I saw the signs and I reasonably panicked. I was like, Jared, what is this? Do you have anything to do with this? Please tell me what is going on. This is one of so many opportunities where he had an out, where I looked at him point blank and was like, tell me what I don't know. Is something going on? What is happening? Please be straight with me. And I got his straight face sincerity of, there's nothing. You're just paranoid. You're actually upsetting me by insinuating that I would cheat on you or that I had anything to do with this. I had nothing to do with Holly's moving. I'm not going to leave you for her. I'll never divorce you. She's getting a divorce, but I will never divorce you. These are the things he was saying to me. And yet, I'm not an idiot. I'm seeing the signs and being told a different story, and I can fill in the blanks there. I don't need to, simultaneously, I want to believe that my husband is a honest person that I can trust. I want to believe the best of him and that, what he says to me is true. And yet I am also witnessing all of this unfold and can see the connections. And so there's this constant, kind of concern in the back of my mind that am I being lied to? And no answers and no clarity. Moving along, getting into what Aries don't. He's standing on my table next to my microphone and he's about to touch something. Yeah. I felt like the goalpost was constantly being moved. He also assured me during this time that would never leave me for her specifically, and she might choose to end her marriage, but it had nothing to do with him. And he would never choose to end his, and so therefore I had nothing to worry about. And this is something he was telling me at the same time she's packing up all of her stuff and following us across the country. I was deeply hurt and at this point pretty indignant that I had been spending months trying to address my unresolved hurt and feelings with him while he continually gave me the silent treatment and pushed me away. Summarizing again, he has come out and said that he basically tried to leave me in October, and I feel like I need to clarify what happened there. He was being really short and cold to me one night, and I was like, if you have something to talk about, let's talk about it. I don't like feeling like you're just being really moody and passive aggressive, and I have to guess what's on your mind. Within 24 hours of that, he got his stuff together, or not his stuff, he emotionally collected himself, and said to me, I don't know if we should be together anymore. Those were the words that he used. I was deeply hurt by that. At this point, he's constantly moving the goalposts and in telling me that he can't be there for me emotionally because I am a very emotional person and I get overwhelmed with things. He did not give me any sort of detailed or reasonable explanation for why he felt we should split. it was very nebulous of like, oh, I feel bad. I don't know if this is working. I don't know what to say to you. And I was desperate for information, desperate to understand what I was doing wrong, and trying to get him to communicate with me. Um, I have been in a position where I was being financially and physically supported by him in basically every way. I had incredible privilege in that, and I acknowledged that and tried to always stay transparent about it online and all of that. Um, I relied on him for a lot of things. When he says that he doesn't know if we should be together, he's not just telling me that, he's not sure for a good emotional split. He's more or less telling me, hey, I am going to leave you behind in life. I will no longer provide for your needs. And this is um, this is a complicated topic, and there's a lot of different emotional facets to it. Um, I loved him desperately, and I wanted to stay with him on an emotional level for no other reason. That is true. On top of that, I also relied on him for all of my physical needs, and we did not enter into that situation accidentally. We didn't enter into that situation because I expected or demanded it of him. We entered into that situation because over the course of our relationship, we went from both making, small amount of money to over time him making an extremely large amount of money. The work reward ratio was such that his job was so lucrative that it did not make sense for me to work. I could have slaved 60 hours a week and it would not have improved our quality of life. For that reason, I did not have a typical job during our marriage. I was financially being cared for by him. I had my hobbies and my artwork and things that did pay for itself. So I had a little bit of like financial, um, not financial independence because I was 100% reliant on him for all of my life stuff. But at the very least, I was taking responsibility with my art and kind of watching that grow. And it was more like a pet project or like a hobby business. Because I was just allowed to survive and live with him. I got a lot of criticism for not being the breadwinner in my relationship and my marriage, but I feel like if most people were in a situation where their partner that they genuinely love for all the right reasons could provide for them for 100% of their needs at no great cost to themselves and no great sacrifice, if you're in a relationship like that with someone who can provide for you, I feel like most people would absolutely take that deal. And if you're claiming otherwise, probably not being that honest with yourself. Um, there is a lot of discourse about, you know, what we work for, what we deserve, and a lot of, especially in the United States, a lot of our kind of impression of what a person's worth is related to their work. And so, anyway, I was taken care of. And so, not only was he telling me that, I was mysteriously failing him emotionally as his wife, but that because of that, he was not going to physically take care of me. He had encouraged me to rely on him in various ways over the course of our relationship. I never expected to be financially taken care of by any man when I was young. I did not enter into a relationship with him or anyone else ever expecting that would be available to me. And then reaching a point where he's like, oh no, I want to take care of you. I want to provide for our future. And that kind of language is like fresh and new to me. I was like, whoa, really? That's your goal? You're providing for our future? Okay. We talked at length for so long, for so many years about this life that we were building together and our goals as artists and individuals. And he was basically saying I am going to leave you behind, and you will not be a part of that future with me. This beautiful future that we have planned, you will not be a part of, and I won't tell you why. You have just mysteriously upset me, and you don't get to know what's going on. And I was deeply heartbroken and struggling to understand what any of this meant. I'm going to recenter myself. Okay. We're in October, where he was trying to break up with me, in his words, by kind of vaguely making statements about how he was unhappy and making zero definitive statements about what he wanted or what was going to happen. He did not say, I want a divorce. He did not say, we're splitting, sorry. He did not say anything definitive. He did not even make, like, statements of intention. It was all very much like, I don't know. Well, I don't know. I just don't know what I want. I don't know if this is working. He talked online about going to therapy for this, or going to couples therapy for this, and I said that he had taken me to therapy under false pretenses, which is the truth. What I meant, what we both meant, were the description, the situation that we're actually describing is, after we had this conversation, I'm like, Jared, I don't understand why you say you aren't sure if we should be together, and I'm not allowed to know why, and you can't vocalize it, you just feel bad. I was like, I need couples therapy. We have to discuss this. I am getting to the point where I'm desperate. I feel so dehumanized by the fact that my emotions are constantly met with silence, and if I discuss what I'm feeling or the ways in which I'm hurt, then he gets so upset that I would describe him as having hurt me. So everything is continually brought back around to whatever his experience is with no regard to mine. So I'm like, okay, please, couples therapy, we need this. It took me to a 30-minute free consultation with a therapist we had never met before, in which you have to, like, kind of feel it out and briefly talk to them to determine, like, what kind of work you're looking to do and whether or not this person is going to be a good fit. We signed up for a trial session with, let's see if this therapist might be able to help us work on our problems, and showed up to that meeting where we sat down together and Jared announced off the bat, yes, I'm actually not willing to work on this. I just brought her here because I know she's going to get really upset when I tell her that. I'm paraphrasing and putting words in his mouth a little bit, but that was the gist of what he was saying, is that basically he had brought me to a therapist's office in order to drop the bomb on me there, and then just, like, not, and then continue to not talk about it, and continue to not do therapy or discuss the issues, but just to say, like, oh, can you take care of her? You're a therapist. The therapist that we were working with was pretty horrified. I could see it on her face of, like, this isn't what I signed up for today. And I felt like this was, at this point, not just incredibly disrespectful of my emotions by leading me on to believe that we were going to have a therapy session where we could address any problem constructively at all, even if he was just going to tell me what he was feeling. Even if something didn't change, we couldn't even get into that. Not only was he disrespecting my feelings emotionally in all kinds of ways by this point, but this particular instance, I felt like, was incredibly disrespectful to a professional's time. And once again, this is supposed to be a free consultation with someone who has not yet entered into a working relationship with us. We have not signed any documents. We have not agreed that this is, we're going to become a client. We have not exchanged, we haven't talked about what her policies are. We show up in the office to have supposedly that conversation, and Jared's like, yeah, I just don't want to work on things. And she's crying, so. We did 2 sessions with this same therapist where Jared did not make definitive statements about what he wanted. It was, there's really no point in talking about, uh, I don't know what they talked about, and I didn't talk about anything constructively with her because she didn't have answers for me either. She was like, I don't know why he's not cooperating or what he wants. We just need to respect him and listen. So I was just continually told to listen and respect him and try to understand, which is what I was doing. Um, and I continually felt like I was just on this wild goose chase to fix things. Um, so I was deeply struggling during this time. I was being dumped for no reason that he was willing to vocalize, and yet I was continually being told that I was the problem in very vague ways, um, that motivated me to try to fix things. When somebody comes to you and says, "You're abusing me," that's an extremely concerning thing to hear, and I took that seriously. I wanted to know what he meant by that in a way that could lead to me constructively working on this issue, especially because things developed so slowly over time with his story constantly changing of, oh, well, I just don't have the emotional bandwidth to talk about this, and then later eventually, oh, well, actually, you're stressing me out by trying to talk about it, so it's your fault and you're the reason that I can't speak. Just everything was continually brought back to be about why I was the issue, and yet I was never allowed to address anything that I was apparently doing wrong. I constantly wanted clarification. I said, if I'm hurting you, describe this behavior that I tell me what to change. Tell me what to fix. If this is real, then I want to take ownership over the way that I, could do better. If the relationship is failing because of me, then let me work harder to fix it. And this was all a wild goose chase. Um, I didn't realize until way after the fact that I never had a chance because it wasn't about that. It wasn't about what I was doing at all. It just came down to him finding a way to justify leaving me without feeling like a bad guy. He just didn't want to look like an asshole. Ultimately, throughout all of this, I feel like the real story here is that Jared just lost interest in me and became interested in someone else and decided to leave his marriage for another woman. It's not illegal. It's not what I wanted, obviously, but no one can stop him, and he is ultimately going to do the thing that he wants. And if he had just taken ownership of his intentions and his feelings, we could have and would have had a much, much different conversation about the dissolution of our marriage, about what that would mean for us moving forward, about what we could each expect from the other person and from the world as we address any of this. And yet, instead of being a situation where he's willing to admit that we grew apart and things got hard and that it wasn't a good fit, he's unwilling to accept any blame whatsoever, and therefore the very fact that I would be unhappy must ultimately be my fault. And it always came back to that, and how could he how can this be justified as something that is out of his hands? Alright, there's a last few points here that I kind of messily skipped. Jared and Holly publicly stated that they started sleeping together in October. This is the same time frame that Jared and I are messily meeting with therapists, and he's just like, I don't know, maybe. But he was ultimately still always agreeing that we had not ended our relationship. At the very least, the conversations were ongoing. And that's what I have to support, my case in text. I was also still living with him and sharing a bed with him. At one point, I said that we shared a bed through Thanksgiving. I looked it up and was checking through all my texts. I moved out of his bedroom on November 9th, so November 11th, November 11th. And I know that because I messaged my friend who'd been encouraging me to do this, that said, you really need to sleep separate for your own sake. If you're not getting what you need from this relationship, you don't feel listened to, you don't feel valued, then separate yourself and, take control over what you can, which is your environment and your comfort level in your space. So that is what I did on November 11th. And I texted that person to be like, look, I did the thing that you recommended because I'm finally at this point where I feel so dehumanized and so unworthy of having any type of productive conversation. I need to be separate now for myself. So ultimately, even the decision to physically separate my body from his was my decision and not his. He could have walked out of our bedroom and slept somewhere else. We had 2 guest rooms at our house at the time. He could have gone to the couch. He could have gone to his friend's house. And he continued to sleep in the bed next to me while he was banging Holly on the side. He told me I was not allowed to go to TwitchCon because through tears he just felt bad. That was the night that he originally told me he wasn't sure if we should stay together. And I convinced him to hold off on making the decision until we had more time to talk about it, was basically what we kept coming back to, is that he refused to just be like, no. And I kept asking for clarity. And it was like he expected the conversation to be over in an instant and him to just be like, well, I don't really want this. Okay, bye. And that he could go off and immediately have sex with the next girl at TwitchCon. Which is what he did do, despite the fact that we had not reached that definitive conclusion. We had not reached a point where we were certainly splitting. Because again, I agreed to not go to TwitchCon in order to save a relationship, in order to please him, in order to give him what he wanted in that moment. And so he left for his early flight, waking me up on my side of the bed to sweetly kiss me goodbye and hug me and assure me that everything would be fine when he got back and that he wouldn't do anything that I needed to worry about. That happened. I can't prove that it happened, but I lived through it. I kissed him again when he got back. I lived with him for months after this while he continued to go off on trips or encourage me to go visit my friends. We kissed on New Year's night at midnight and held hands, and he said to me, I know this year has been hard, but I'm committed with you, I'm still working. All of that had happened after he was already sleeping with her. Maybe on some level in his mind he genuinely did mean to end things with me first before starting that, but that's not what he did. He could not commit to anything. Couldn't commit to me, couldn't commit to her. He tried to have it both ways and just pretend he wasn't doing that. He started lying to both of us. And now we're in a position where I finally accepted the fact that he's lied to me and she still can't and won't. He's championing him online right now. Yeah. During this time, my window's open for ventilation. Sorry about the noise. During this time, he was constantly wearing his wedding ring around me because he knew that would be something that I would notice and I would feel bad about. He took it off. We were going out to dinner almost every night. It was the lifestyle we lived. I don't do that anymore. Doing couple things. Making shitty Valentine's plans, but we made them. He took me out on Valentine's. And it was literally mid-February before he was willing to compose himself, take a deep breath, and say, I am ending our relationship. Mid-February is when he made a definitive statement to say, I am breaking up with you. And at that point, I was hurt, frustrated, indignant over the situation, and I did still want him to change his mind on some level because I put so much effort into this. Oh, it was naive. It was naive. But I was also so frustrated with the way that I had been treated and willing to finally see that I did need and deserved more, that I was basically willing to accept it at that point. I mean, I was and I wasn't. There's a cat here. So bringing us up to now, I've gotten through a lot of things. I'm going to sit here and think for a minute. There's major points that I missed. And I'm sure that I have glossed over a lot of things. I'm sure that I have not answered everyone's questions. I'm not reading the chat. I'm not able to accept feedback right now. I have gotten to a point of being overwhelmed with all of the voices shouting at me. I need to focus on what my mission is moving forward and what I want for myself, what I expect for myself, what I'm going to do for myself. I've been, yeah. So I discovered the affair. I need to talk about that a little bit to finish up the story of everything. I also published quite a few text message chains between myself and my former therapist and myself and a friend. Obviously, these are not proof. They don't prove that these things happened. It is a transcript of me telling somebody what I was going through while I was going through it. So in the same vein as this stream, like, it's a record of my experience in the same way that my texts were a record of my experience. They exist, and yeah, you'll have to take my word for it, I guess. You can believe me or not. They exist as a record of what I was going through in real time, what I was experiencing. I reached a point of not trusting him. All this stuff was happening. More and more lies were coming out of his mouth that were more and more difficult for me to accept, and it was clear that like something was wrong and things were slipping out of place. I've posted already a lot of conversations about how I didn't feel respected, how I didn't feel like he was being honest and truthful with me. It was the night before I got on my plane to leave for Louisiana, May. I finally discovered his previous cell phone hidden in his office under some papers. We had replaced our cell phones near the end of December 2018. And so he was using a different phone, and I discovered the one that he had just replaced a few months ago, which contained a very detailed record of his ongoing sexual affair with Holly. They publicly talked about how they started sleeping together in October and how it supposedly wasn't cheating because Jared had half-assedly told me that he maybe didn't know if we should stay together. We were married. Marriage means something to some people. And yes, you can get divorced. And yes, marriages come in all different shapes and sizes and agreements and boundaries, all of which were disrespected in mine. Only to be treated in the end like a marriage is like a high school breakup. You just block her on Twitter. Get the next girl. So the night before I leave for this con, I discover the actual proof. This is the first time I have had in my hands evidence that he is talking to her behind my back and also literally sleeping with her. I do have my own copy of everything saved. It is illegal for me to release it to the general public. I don't intend to, I don't think I would get anything from releasing it. Okay, they both treated me like I was threatening to release revenge porn, and it's just like, I wouldn't engage in that. I'm not above making you sweat. I wouldn't actually do that. And also on top of that, the nudes that they sent each other are the least incriminating part of the entire thing. What is actually incriminating about their conversations is a lot of extremely heavy-handed emotional manipulation from Holly to get what she wanted from him. I'm not going to go into detail. There was a lot of really concerning stuff in those messages. One general observation that I made that was like this weird, I don't know how to feel about it. He treats her as badly as he treated me. Only she believes it's my fault. There's a good general summary of what I found in those text messages. Him ignoring her for hours on end while she freaks out and has emotions. Her saying, please don't punish me by ignoring me just because I'm upset, which those literally could have been my words. Followed up with, oh, I know that you're just treating me like this because Heidi must really be upsetting and making you anxious right now. Heidi must really be hurting. I don't know what's going on, but it must be bad. Heidi must be doing something really bad for you to be ignoring me and treating me this way. That is how she justifies all of this. Anyway, what I found in there was way beyond just evidence of a sexual affair. It was very heartbreaking evidence of all kinds of terrible things that won't get to see the light of day, so we're going to move on. What I got from that was an emotional 180 from not understanding why Jared was treating me this way and desperately trying to fix myself so that he would love me, to realizing that that was not the problem and that I needed to get out of there as fast as I possibly could, because the level of deception that he maintained for months ongoing, I don't even know how to describe it besides to say that it horrifies me that he is capable of that. And when I discovered that he is capable of lying to me on that level, and that for so many months I believed he was completely sincere, it was like waking up with this terror of like, how can I share a house with you? Who are you? What kind of person is capable of this? I became terrified and desperate to leave immediately, which is exactly what I started doing. There's a record of, in detail, how I kind of worked it out, how I tried to avoid things. Being not ready to call him out yet because I was so afraid of what his reaction would be to be getting caught. So I tried to beat around the bush and try to like secure my future and then leave. But at that point, I was very desperate to leave, and that is, I think, supported by my behavior, and that I was actively working on moving out. As someone who was financially supported in the long term by my husband, there is a lot of problem solving that I have to do for my future, in how I'm going to secure an ongoing income that's reliable, how I am going to take care of myself emotionally, the logistically of getting a house or getting a place to live and a vehicle. We were sharing a vehicle. He agreed very readily. He's like, yeah, I feel like he used gifts in the end to mollify me and try to keep me satisfied. Like, oh, we'll get you a car before we split assets. So that way it won't be nearly as expensive for you because you're going to need a car. So he's like kind of playing along with me. He brought up the car thing as something that he gifted to me and how he wasn't abusive because he gifted me things. And it ultimately always felt like, something that was solely within his control and that he was just going to hold over me. Anyway, so everything from that point on, most of that has been covered in public. If you felt like reading it, you can read it, you can find it. I, at that point, just desperately wanted to get away, and that's what I did. At the time that things finally went public on Twitter, Um, that was the first day that I was in my new space alone, and I was feeling so empowered and so much better about getting out of the situation and feeling like, yes, okay, here's my independent future. This is this place where I'm going to build this life for myself. Um, I finally decided to break my silence after months and months and months and tell my Facebook friends first, you know, we're getting divorced and Jared cheated on me. That's all true. Um, he used that to say that I went public first. That is not the same thing. Especially to somebody who he considers, I mean, he is a public figure, point blank. Stuff he says to, he doesn't even use his private Facebook anymore, but when he did, like, there is a very big difference between, like, your friend socials and your outward public facing socials. And for him to pretend that those are the same thing or act like me speaking to the people who are personally involved in my life is the same as him announcing our divorce to hundreds of thousands of people on Twitter. You cannot pretend in good faith that those are the same things. Mine was a friends filtered only post. I did not even name his mistress. I just said, this has been a really terrible emotional roller coaster for me. And yeah, it was. I've been through a lot this past year, and I don't want to even dwell on that, the worst of it, because I'm feeling, God, I feel so much better just talking right now. Like, this is what I wanted. This is what I need from this, and I'm gonna get through this. We're gonna wrap this up, and then I'm gonna be done. I was almost crying with tears of happiness this morning, thinking about how I am going to sit and tell my story, and then it'll be out there, and then I can just live again, and people can decide what they want. But I will no longer feel controlled and held in silence by people who just always had a lot more power over me. That was always the case. I think people who were not aware of who any of us were to start with, who just came into this as some sort of internet drama they were observing, I think a lot of people got the impression that we were like three internet personalities duking it out. That was very much not the case. I was very much in obscurity compared to them. These are people who are professional internet personalities for many years. Both of them have been on TV for different things. And meanwhile, I have like a modest art following. Yes, it was not nothing, but it was also nothing compared to what they had. Not all followings are created equally. I didn't have people who were supporting me because they love me necessarily. I had people who were generally interested in my art and maybe curious about what I might produce. Um, and I did not have a massive rush of like loyal fans who already loved me and just couldn't believe that their favorite internet celebrity, like, I didn't I don't really have supporters in that way. And they do, which is, neither here nor there, but this was never like three equal parties with equal clout who have, various damaging things to say about each other. This was two very famous people um, controlling the narrative for someone who didn't have that same platform. A lot of people have talked about how my followers on Twitter skyrocketed after going public. That is true. I'll acknowledge that. Stupid not to. Um, that was in no way a motivating factor, and geez, I would sure love to have an intact marriage and sense of self-worth instead of a bunch of followers on the internet. Beyond that, I feel like people who did take note of this situation, a lot of those people, this is actually a good thing to talk about. A huge portion of those people who came and offered me support in the aftermath of this did so because they had their own similar experiences. And that was incredibly empowering for me too. People reached out to me and said, it was really validating to hear you tell your story or to see what you've gone through and to be willing to speak up about it and not back down. But honestly, for me, I had been living in such total isolation that I didn't know this was a thing that could happen to people, much less a pattern. Throughout my entire time of being like iced out of my own marriage with no explanation, um, I couldn't understand why Jared was unable to take me seriously, why every conversation had to always come back to him and what he was feeling, and why I had to tiptoe it. I don't know. I don't have any answers about what went on in his head or why he chose the things he did. I just know that apparently it's common enough that there's a whole community of people out there who have experienced something like this. And connecting with those people saved me. Thank you. Um, it made me realize that I am not alone. I deserve better than lies. Um, oh, thanks. That, I'm not crazy. That I'm a rational person with reasonable expectations. That I am worthy of a partner who's honest to me. Yeah, let's spend a minute. Let's spend a minute with these affirmations because that's really, really what it. This is. Yeah, we're almost caught. We're pretty much caught to the present. So let's wrap this up emotionally. That's what we're gonna do. Aries, what do you have to add? You were there. Um, I had a little section in my outline that was gonna refer back to Jared. I believe that Jared has hurt a lot of people, not just me. I do not believe that he is a pedophile. He indicated that he was asking for ages, and I believe that he tried, however poorly and messily. He still took advantage of things. He still didn't do the right thing, and I wish people were holding him accountable for that more than just saying like, "Oh, well, you cleared up one accusation, so therefore you're totally innocent of everything." I believe that Jared abused his power and standing over myself and many others. I don't know the whole truth beyond that. I'm not telling people what to think. I'm just sharing what I feel and experience. So yeah, there's something that I wanted to reiterate. That we're getting toward the end. Yeah, we're getting toward the end. And I wanted to reiterate that. That's fair. It's fair to say that he isn't guilty of the very worst of the accusations against him, for sure. Beyond that, I don't know, and I can't say, and it's not my place. I just know that I don't trust him. What I observe with him, in him, is a level of deception that horrifies me and scares me. And when I discovered it and what he was capable of, I ran. This, you have meat on your chin. You have meat on your chin right now. He's got seafood pate on his chin. So, Aries saved my life. People are like, oh, she just posts pictures of Aries so that people will be nice to her on Twitter. Yeah, guilty as charged. I like posting pictures of my cat because my mentions are great afterward. I'm gonna keep doing that. There's no crime. And you can follow me for cat pics if that's what you want. It's not gonna stop. For the future, that's where we're going. We're gonna focus on where we go from here now. Today, after doing the stream, I feel much better about myself. I feel much better about being able to face the world, having shared what I went through. I wonder if I missed anything good. I was hurt. I was cheated on. He continually misrepresented our boundaries. He continually misrepresented what I had agreed to. He continually signed me up for more than I had agreed to. And yeah, he went during the aftermath where a bunch of people were saying like, "Oh, I exchanged news with Jared. Here's my story." I was just getting completely bombarded. My mentions were just like a shit show. I couldn't even go through them and decipher what was real or not, or what happened or didn't, and I still don't know. I was aware of some of it. I agreed to some of it. I tried to be the cool wife who let him do what he wanted so that he would be happy. I didn't get that, and then he also used my consent against me. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Blamed for consenting, blamed for revoking consent kind of situation. For the future, I'm not changing my approach to my content. I'm just going to work harder. I'm not going to become some other type of streamer. I'm not going to become some other type of YouTuber. I've actually, like, literally not cashed in on this in the sense that throughout all this summer when I'm trying to put my, build my life back together, this is the first stream I've done. Jared literally resumed streaming before I did. Holly literally launched her next line and clothing options or whatever before I did. Both of them got back on their feet professionally before I did. And so I'm streaming here today. Yeah, I hope to be able to stream more regularly, normal streams, normal craft streams in the future. But I honestly have been focused more on helping myself with my needs emotionally instead of like trying to milk this financially for what it's worth. Um, I do have some anxieties about the future financially. I don't have any ongoing monetary support from Jared whatsoever. So I have to figure that out. I have to take responsibility for my financial future. I have to finish this divorce up. I do feel like they have the upper hand in the court and in the public sphere and because he just has way more resources than I do. I cannot afford a defamation suit to make this statement mean anything, like, in court, you know what I mean? And there's no guarantee. Who knows what would happen? That's just going down a possibility of, anyway. I have to be okay with moving forward on my own terms. Is really what it comes down to. I don't have any plans or designs for that. I have to come to terms with myself emotionally, where I'm at, what I'm going to do next. I'm not interested in being some kind of new public figure. I'm just going to do the same things I've been working on. I'm going to make art and make things that make me happy. I'm going to do fairy houses and, like, Mori girl clothes, and I'm going to update my shop, and I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to learn how to take more responsibility for monetizing my art and my work, and but I'm going to continue to do all of these things for me. The kind of content that I make, and, like, the general, like, artistic or, like, cosplay, costuming, work stuff, is just never going to be popular on the mainstream in the same way that Jared's content was. What's on my mind? The fact that Jared would refer to anybody as e-begging when his job is just to play video games on the internet is ridiculous. For a long time, I felt so inferior to him because he was the breadwinner and that he was the moneymaker, and because he could get a lot of money by playing a video game. And even though I had, like, college educated skills and, like, was working on, like, career goals as well, the fact that I wasn't monetizing them very effectively made me feel so inferior to that, as though the money that you get is the only thing that matters. I don't know. Depending on who you are, maybe that makes a thing. Anyway, I went through a long period of feeling like I was somehow less deserving than him, or that my online content was somehow, like, less worthy of attention or anybody caring about it. But really, I mean, it just comes down to people's preferences. The kind of art and stuff that I do is very niche. It's probably never going to be, like, wildly popular, and it's fine. I would be doing a lot of things very differently if that were my intention. My entire approach to cosplay, my entire approach to being on the periphery of YouTube, professional YouTube for so many years. I would have done so many things differently over the years if my goal were attention. And so I feel like that's just a general logical description of my behavior that doesn't line up with, yeah. If my goal was to milk this for whatever it could get from it, I would have just behaved differently from the start. Anyway. Uh, so yeah, I've been focused on taking care of myself, and I'm going to continue doing that. That's the only thing I can do. I can't change what they did, or what they feel, or what they say to anybody. I can't change what other people think of me. I can just be consistent, show integrity and honesty, and that I'm not a crazy person. I lived for so long and doubting myself and feeling like, my feelings or emotions were invalid because I was being suppressed. Um, I constantly told that, I shouldn't feel that way or shouldn't talk about that or just anything, just all of this pressure and blame and shame and, releasing myself from that feels so good. Yeah. I want to take a moment for my silver linings. Um, I made these various notes for today, but this is actually on my phone saved because this is something that I'm going to refer back to for as long as it takes. My list of silver linings. I need to switch over to my other account. I know the beginning of it is. There we go. Got it. So this is the start. I'm going to come up with more. I'm sharing what I have right now. This is for me. But this is what I've been working on. I've been working on myself. Um, I've become a better and more responsible adult since leaving Jared. I live alone. I have to handle, any physical tasks in the house, any problem solving, taking care of things, etc. So that's something that I didn't have before that I'm proud that I developed. I am far more confident in myself on every level, just personally and professionally and anything else. I have had to learn to stand up for myself. I grew a spine throughout all of this that I didn't have before. I got pushed to my breaking point, and yeah, I overcame that. I found out that a lot more people care about me than I realized. That includes acquaintances, friends, people that I sort of knew, people who knew me tangentially around the cosplay community or whatever. Random people online that have experienced something similar to what I've been through. I was met with an outpouring of love that I didn't expect or think that I deserved. Um, I'm gradually becoming more comfortable opening up emotionally to others. This is still a big process. Yeah. Um, I've developed a lot of serious intimacy issues throughout this. It's hard for me to accept hugs from friends, even when I want them, because the feeling of being touched by another human is so foreign to me. Um, I'm gonna have to keep working on that. I'm gonna do it. Um, I deserve to be loved by someone who can be honest with me even when it hurts. I deserve um, a space where I'm comfortable sharing what I'm feeling other people, potentially a partner in the future. Who cares? I deserve that. I'm gonna get it eventually. I'm gonna work on that. I'm more honest with myself about my needs. Uh, for a long time, when I was running around trying to please Jared and figure out how I could save my marriage, um, I was just constantly compacting myself into a smaller box to uh, try to take care of him. And now I need to be honest with what I need moving forward, and that's gonna include, um, looking out for me, and in a respectful way to others. But I'm on better terms with both of my parents now. I've never been very close to them. They're also divorced from each other, uh, but throughout this, I've gotten to reconnect with my family a little bit, because I had felt isolated from them, earlier in my life. Yeah. I'm now more comfortable where I live, and I mean that in like an abstract sense. It's not about the living. It's not about the features of the house. I am mentally and emotionally at home here. This is a space that I feel a sense of ownership over. I don't literally own this house I'm renting, but I feel like this is my space. This is Heidi's and Aries' house. This is our space, and it suits us. And I've spent time settling it and getting nesting, kind of, making sure that we wake up and go to bed in a place where we feel comfortable and ready to build a future. And then finally, the last one I have written down for now, which is I have enough resources to survive in the short term and enough sense to survive in the long term. Which just means, like, I have a lot to figure out as far as financially caring for myself into the future and what I'm going to do with all of that. But I have a newfound sense of confidence and belief in myself and that I can make things happen for me and that I'm going to be able to I'm going to be able to face challenges in a way that I didn't even, with this confidence and resilience that I didn't know that I had before this. I'm tired. I just talked for a really long time. I said what I have to say that's on my mind right now. I'm sure I missed something. I'm sure this was imperfect. This is what I got. I did it. I feel better. I'm gonna go share some wine with my friend and continue to emotionally impact things. But you know what? From here on out, it's just future thinking um, because I got what I needed from this, and I can't ask for anything more from anybody else. I'm just gonna focus on moving forward and making things work. Okay, bye.